Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:06 on this Wednesday after Christmas. It's not Boxing Day. It's the day after Boxing Day. It's just the 27th day of December. It's nothing special. There's really, I mean, every day is a special day when we get to start it with you, our friends. So there's that. But honestly, let's not make it bigger than it is. It's just, well, it is the last Wednesday of the year.
You're kind of grinchy.
That's something.
You're a little
well, no,
grinchy. It's a very special time of the year. Before New Year's, it's the Christmas season.
And Kamala Harris gets together around and sit on the floor.
What was the word she was using?
Melekalikimaka.
You're very good. Very good.
It's an old Kwanzaa tradition. Coming up at 7:35, Chuck Thies is going to join us, talk about the year that was in D.C. politics. 8:05, Sean Carney, 40 Days for Life, and 8:35, Julio Rosas will tell us his favorite Kwanzaa memory growing up. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock, who was actually your Miss Kwanzaa this year, aren't you?
Didn't you I am. Yes, I was
the
crowned.
Pageant. Are you going to be in a calendar?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, never going to get over the calendar.
Joining us, right? We've actually had some developments in the Middle East this week that need our attention, especially outside of Israel, because there's now retaliatory actions not just by the U.S. but also by Israel against the people who are funding these terrorists and who are part and parcel to the war on freedom and liberty. Joining us is Behnam Ben Taleblu. He's with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Pleasure to be with you, and good morning to you guys and your listeners.
First, let's talk about the American strikes here. Lloyd Austin bent over backwards in announcing that we had struck back against the Hezbollah terrorists who had continued to attack our forces in Iraq by saying that it was a proportionate response. I don't ever really remember a United States military official proclaiming that our response has been proportional. Why is that even a word that's part of the description here? I don't need our military response to be proportional. I need it to be effective.
One would say not just effective, but decisive and overwhelming, so that we wouldn't have to engage in several proportional and limited self-defense strikes again and again and again, which has sadly been the case since about 2021. If you just look at the number of attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria since October 7, or actually one should say since October 17th, since this larger axis of resistance, this constellation of proxies and partners and terror groups that Iran has created or co-opted but ultimately controls, they've fired on our positions for about 100 times.
Yeah.
And there's only a small handful of times that we've responded. And every time we responded, exactly this language that you're rightly critiquing, in my view, has been deployed by the Defense Department. In my view, this is about the politics of foreign policy rather than foreign policy itself.
And actually, I think it's even more insidious than that. By saying, we have retaliated in a proportional manner, is there an sort of subtext there in criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli forces? Like, unlike Israel, our response has been proportionate. You know what I mean?
I think that could be one way for some to read it, but I really do think that the message is more to the American audience that the U.S. administration is not trying to start yet another Middle Eastern war. But the problem is this is an instance where, and a repeated instance where, your domestic politics is impeding your foreign policy by continuously trying to signal to the American audience that what you're doing is super limited, super legal, super in self-defense only. What you're signaling to the foreign adversary is that you actually won't do what it takes to stop them. And that's why we've had, again, over 100 attacks in 2 months.
I want to pivot over to Iran. You've said that the Biden administration is misreading Iran's posture as de-escalation in the region. What would you call Iran's posture, and why is the Biden administration downplaying sort of Iran's role here?
Well, unfortunately, there's been this trend in U.S. foreign policy where one president tries to 180 degrees undo the legacy and accomplishments and achievements of the other. And since January 2021, there's been, rather than enforce sanctions, there's been pulled punches. things like we saw in February 2021, such as the delisting of the Houthis from the foreign terrorist organization list. The Houthis are in Yemen. They fired on U.S. vessels, vessels headed to Israel, vessels just engaging in regular trade around the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb, doing things that literally define what a terrorist is, all because of, again, the desire to score a goal on the opposite side of the political spectrum. And here, the overarching 500,000-foot philosophical thing for the administration has been to try to restore the 2015 Iran nuclear deal that former President Donald Trump left in 2018. And that desire to restore the deal has led to unenforced sanctions, has led to more restraint, which in the face of the Iranian adversary has actually escalated its nuclear program in qualitative and quantitative ways never before seen. Its militias and proxies and terror groups are engaging in more attacks against America, American positions, and America's partners and allies than ever before seen. And right now we continue to live in this box where even the language that we use impedes our ability to contest them.
It sure appears as though that Benjamin Netanyahu, his government, and the leadership of the IDF are completely ignoring the Biden administration, thankfully, thank God, and not bowing to the pressure that they continue to put on them, claiming that they're, not engaging this war against Hamas in a responsible manner. And now that they're indicating that they will be striking back against the Iran assets in Yemen and in Iraq, that Israel, not just focusing on Gaza and Hamas there, but going after Yemen, what does that tell you? What does that indicate to you in terms of Israel's sort of worldview and strategy here?
Well, sometimes geography breeds an entirely different kind of worldview. Israel is in the Middle East. Israel understands the neighborhood. America has the luxury and the privilege of being an ocean and more than that, away from the region. And what Israel did with the recent reports of striking back in Yemen and Iraq and allegedly even in Iran recently is to tell this larger terror network, what the Iranians call the axis of resistance, that they can't activate these different fronts against Israel while Israel remains busy contesting and trying to destroy Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So it's going to be a delicate balancing act for Netanyahu and the IDF in Gaza as well, because you don't want to respond in every theater at the same level, because then you'd be fighting a multi-front war, which is exactly what the adversary wants. But doing just enough to strike back a couple of times in a somewhat deniable way to make sure that the adversary doesn't have a totally free hand in all those places. So again, it's a delicate balancing act for them as well. But the priority has to be destroying Hamas in Gaza.
One last question here. You all at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies do a really great job of analyzing this stuff and creating sort of roadmaps for political types and legislators and politicians in D.C. to sort of find their way through what sometimes are complex foreign policy issues. On this issue, on Israel, do you believe going into this presidential election year that this is going to be an important topic? Do you think that this will be potentially a game-changing and election-changing topic for the American? Because it appears as though Democrats are no longer on the side of our most important ally in that region.
I think this is going to be a question not necessarily up for referendum between Democrats and Republicans, but up for referendum geographically and demographically. And I think the Gaza war, as well as geographic and democratic changes, particularly within the Democratic Party, but also within debates within the Republican Party about isolationism versus internationalism. We've seen that a bit with the Ukraine war. We're going to see that with the coming debate on China. We're even seeing that right now, both in the Congress as well as across the country, of how to deal with the larger threat coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as how both sides deal with the politics and policy of the border. These are geographic and demographic changes that are manifesting themselves, leading to things like, marches across the country trying to shut down Christmas while doing a pro-Palestinian march. You've seen that during a few other marches in big cities earlier this year as well. There's a lot of abhorrent stuff going on campuses, that I'm sure as you and your listeners know. But I would expect these trends to continue to intensify. The degree to which they manifest themselves in foreign policy debates that can affect the election, I think, remains to be seen. But this is a larger national demographic-based and geographic-based conversation that no one is done with and will far outlive the 2024 election.
Behnam, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great New Year.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you and all your listeners.
Julie Gunlock has COVID, and we love that about her. Because whenever anything is in the news about COVID now, we can sort of personalize it. We can draw your direct and immediate experience into the conversation.
Yes, how lovely.
You don't seem as pleased as I am. You have to understand, my father-in-law has had it all week. As we've been trying to celebrate Christmas and have family together. It's been miserable. I know it's been miserable for you because you have to isolate yourself and keep yourself.
And I got it on Christmas Day.
I know.
I tested positive on Christmas.
Terrible. Merry Christmas.
Day.
Happy birthday, Jesus. Now quarantine yourself.
I have things to do.
I hate it. But here's the thing. You have to understand, you've known me long enough to know how completely neurotic I am. I am sure. I feel like I've caught it from you electronically. I'm just, every time I have to clear my throat, oh, here we go.
I know.
I've got it.
I know.
But the timing here is amazing. So the reason we're talking about it is because I'm quite sure when you get back from your Christmas vacation or when people return back to your life or you get back to work, you're going to find out a whole lot of people have tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
It's going around right now as we speak. And the timing is such that we're going into a presidential election year. You know what they're going to try to do.
Right. I know exactly what they're going to try to do. Yep.
So given that, we need to beat the drum as loud as possible about the lies we were told. And I want you to listen. This was testimony that was done. Rand Paul it wasn't an official Senate hearing, but he had, through the Independent Institute, they can do this. You can use the Senate chamber room to have a forum of sorts. You remember Dr. Scott Atlas. He was one of the outlying voices during the entire pandemic early on out of Stanford. Mm-hmm. Who said, what the hell are we doing here? And actually, Trump brought him into the team. In July, he joined the team. He was constantly shot down by Birx and Fauci.
Yes.
And I want you to listen to part of his statement that he gave. This was about a month ago, I think. But the video is now just starting to get published and put out there. Listen to what he talked specifically about our children. What we knew, when we knew it, and what was done.
America really failed. It's even stronger, I would say. It's a disgrace what happened. When I say we knew in spring of 2020 several things. We knew that the risk to children from this disease was minuscule.
Just because people's memories, sadly, get clouded. He just said spring of 2020. Spring. You know, the lockdown was ordered on March 20th.
Yep.
So, which is the day before spring began. So we knew basically during the first 15 days to slow the spread.
Yes.
We knew the kids were safe. All right? But listen again.
Proven all over the world from dozens of studies in dozens of countries that the risk of infection fatality in people under 20 was something like 0.0003%. And re-looking at that data even today, the risk is so low that there are actually less deaths for children who are healthy than seasonal influenza, even though that ignites people when you say that. That's the fact.
It's a fact, yes, and it does. It ignites people, and people get angry, and they start screaming at you and calling you names. But those are the facts, and they're indisputable. And yet, Julie, you're already seeing headlines out of places like Gavin Newsom's California and being floated around here in this area that because of this latest outbreak, we need to start shutting schools down.
I want to remind everyone that so he's saying in the spring of 2020, we knew that it was not a huge risk for kids. In January of 2021, so around 18 months later, a school board member in Alexandria, Virginia, said on a PTA meeting, the parents have to decide, do you want your kids to be alive or to be educated?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what they were doing to parents. Yeah. This is what they were saying to parents. And I was on that PTA meeting. I remember this. and it was recorded, and it sort of went viral. And it was so appalling because we knew as parents there had been some information out there that kids were not getting this, that kids were not, but we were still being bullied and made to feel guilty if we wanted schools to open up. So it's really important to not only remember how quickly we knew, but then 18 months later, parents were still being threatened and bullied and made to feel bad for wanting schools to open.
Yeah, we're not going to let them do it again. We promise you, we're not going to let them do it again. It's 7:23. Coming up, 2023 was pretty bad in Washington, D.C. I mean, if you count crime and violence and the economy, yeah, pretty bad. Chuck Thies is going to give his assessment and then talk about whether it can be turned around next year. Keep it here. It's 7:36 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here. It's Wednesday, the 27th day of December, the last Wednesday of the year. Make the most of it. Coming up at 8:05, we're going to speak with Sean Carney from 40 Days for Life. And also at 8:35, it'll be Julio Rosas joining us. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie, feeling good?
I'm hanging in there. Barely.
I care deeply. Mm-hmm. Joining us now. Why are you scumbag? I do care. Joining us now is Chuck Thies. He's a political analyst for DC politics. And we're taking a look back on the year that was of 2023. Boy, I feel, Chuck, like it was just a year ago when we were talking about how horrible the crime and acts of violence and carjacking and restaurant closures and the economy was in D.C. in 2022. And boy, howdy, did 2023 top that all. I mean, it actually got worse.
You know, Larry, I never like to say I told you so, but
go ahead.
I told you so. And I also said that, unfortunately, the lawmakers in D.C. would do nothing at all to attempt to stem the crime crisis and don't even talk about the local economy because they would do nothing at all to improve that. If anything, they would pass regulations to stymie it. But the crime crisis, of course, in D.C. is out of control. This year, carjackings doubled. We will almost have 1,000 carjackings this year. That's, 3 a day. I think there was 950 as of Christmas Day. Oh, Christmas Day, there were 2 carjackings.
I laugh only because it's so absurd. And it's absurd when you see, in March, I think it was, Council Chairman Phil Mendelson testifying before Congress, trying to save his ill-fated crime bill, was claiming that there wasn't a crime problem in Washington, D.C. It's atrocious, and there's no accountability at all.
I've known Phil Mendelson, the D.C. Council Chair, for more than 20 years, and I know that this man pays attention to details, granular details. And at the time, when he was sitting in front of Congress under oath, denying the existence of a crime crisis, repeatedly saying there is not a crime crisis in D.C., he knew that the juvenile murder rate had doubled. And I just don't know how you can say that there's not a crisis when twice as many children are murdered this year as opposed to last year. He knew there was a crisis, but instead he decided to play politics. As a matter of fact, he slipped when he was asked about this recently on another radio program because he introduced a series of meaningless, what he calls public safety policies. And he was asked, so are you doing this because there's a crime crisis in D.C.? And he complained that the host was using that expression. And the host said, well, isn't it a crisis? And he said, well, I didn't want to say that there was a crisis because Capitol Hill Republicans will use that in an effort to limit our autonomy and oppose statehood. And so he's putting and so that's an admission that he put politics ahead of public safety.
Yeah. Chuck, it is, we're talking about carjackings and murder and really horrible crimes, but it's also an analysis of the FBI crime statistics found that D.C. takes the crown as petty crime capital of America. So this is things like pickpocketing and purse snatching and vandalism, shoplifting. That also has an impact on not just the businesses offering services, but on people wanting to leave their apartments, for goodness sake, to go out to dinner. I think residents are scared to get out there on the streets or to walk, to different venues for a night out.
Oh, well, there's no doubt about that. The former Attorney General of D.C., the local Attorney General, Karl Racine, said that he doesn't let his wife fill the car up with gasoline anymore because he said that. He said as he was leaving office. And I know lots of people who live in neighborhoods that have less public safety than others, and they will no longer fill up their cars with gasoline. They don't go to the local grocery store. They travel distances. They go into Maryland, and their tax dollars are collected there, or they go into other parts of D.C., which is an inconvenience. So people are definitely scared. Look, it's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons that the Capitals and the Wizards are going to move to Northern Virginia.
Yes.
There was a canary in the coal mine. You just never see this. In a downtown, bustling neighborhood, the McDonald's closed. The McDonald's. It did. And it didn't close because they weren't making money. It's right next to a basketball and hockey arena that has concerts and monster truck shows. There's plenty of customers. But no one was going in because it was an apocalyptic nightmare scene in there. I don't even want to tell you what I saw in there 3 years ago when I took my teen son to an event at the stadium, and he wanted, like a burger or something on the way out. But let's just say that the people who were in there didn't understand where the bathroom was.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we had to witness. But we didn't have to witness it, too. It wasn't just us. It was a family event. So you're talking about a bunch of dads and some moms with their children. So the city has really pivoted in the wrong direction. The policymakers ignored it for political reasons. We know that because they've admitted it. The mayor was boxed in, not able to do anything because the council really has a lot of control. She definitely has some ownership in this problem as well, but the council really set the tone, both the political stage as well as the funding stage, to hamstring her. And we're in a situation now where we have only 75% of the police that we had a decade ago. We have the fewest number of police at any time in the past 50 years. And so not that police are the only element that improves and protects public safety, but they're critical to it. And so unfortunately, this crisis that we're in is not going to end anytime soon because we don't have the tools to address it.
Chuck, Julie and I are Republicans, and like most Republicans in this area, we don't live in D.C. because we're basically told we're not wanted or needed in Washington. I've given up hope that a Republican could get elected and maybe change things. But is there a dynamic within the Democratic Party in Washington where there's your sane Democrats or more conservative Democrats, or maybe even Republicans who just call themselves Democrats because there's no way they could ever get elected? Is there a lane for a new type of Democrat to get elected and actually make a difference here?
So it's a very narrow lane. There is a Democratic primary in this city on the 4th of June in 2024. About half of the council is up. The mayor and the council chairman are not up for re-election in this cycle. And there are a couple candidates who are out there now talking about law and order, talking about more sensible business policies. There is a lane, but it's very narrow. And unfortunately, a lot of people who think along the lines of public safety and better business environments and sensible policies are literally afraid to step into the squared circle of politics in D.C. because there's still a very active far left, very aggressive, who will do worse than just shout you down. They'll make your lives miserable.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of brave people. There are also people, and they have filed a committee. They haven't filed the paperwork to actually pick up the petitions yet, but they filed a campaign committee, meaning they can raise money. And this committee is called Recall Charles Allen. He is the Ward 6 D.C. council member who oversaw the Judiciary Committee and oversaw a lot of the changes in policies that have led to the crime problem and the degradation of public safety. So perhaps there isn't as much bandwidth for sensible candidates, but there certainly seems to be an effort to punish one of the politicians that is viewed as being responsible for this mess.
Well, Chuck, we'll have to just watch that space. But yeah, that recall effort could be very interesting if it catches fire. I can't imagine anyone more deserving here in Washington than Mr. Allen. Thank you, Chuck. Happy New Year to you. Hopefully we'll have a
Happy
better
New Year to you guys.
But you didn't
enjoy
bring
the
us
last
much.
Wednesday of 2023.
Yeah, it's such a major thing, the last Wednesday of the year. Thanks, Chuck. It's 7:45. A very Feliz Navidad to everyone. This is our opportunity to pander to the Spanish-speaking audience. And we're not beneath that. We need to grow our audience any way we can. So we're pandering as much as possible. In fact, let me go the extra mile. At 8:35, we're going to talk to Julio Rosas. By the way, knowing Julio for as long as I have.
I have COVID. I can't think of anything funny to say.
Julio Rosas will join us, which will up our Brown and Latinx sort of audience in a huge way, our cred. Here's something really important to know about Julio Rosas. Doesn't speak a word of Spanish. Not a syllable. I know more Spanish than Julio Rosas from 2 years in high school. Oh,
That's nuts. That's so
It's a
funny.
phenomenal truth about Julio Rosas. That said, as a proud Latinx,
Do
he was
you say his name Rosas more than him?
Julio Rosas.
How does he say it? Rosas.
Roses. No, he plays it up too. You know,
Okay, all right.
You do what you got to do in this this industry. No, so anyway, Julio Rosas is going to join us for a couple of reasons, but partly because he was absolutely disgusted by the Christmas greeting from the governor of Colorado. Here, listen to a little bit of it here.
Feliz Navidad.
Oh.
Feliz Navidad.
Yeah.
Feliz Navidad. Prospero año y felicidad.
Now, here's what you need to know about the governor of Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Jared Polis is his name. He is
Can we
the whitest
first,
man in America.
Can we first describe also that there's a dance that goes along with
Oh
this?
yeah,
It looks
no.
like
He
he's
does
riding
a little
pony.
He does a little jig, a little. Yeah, it's the most embarrassing
Horrifying.
fat bald white guy singing and dancing routine you have ever seen in your life. And I don't know
What
if
in the
here's.
world?
I saw this video and I thought, did the governor lose a bet? It's the only thing I could think of.
It's very strange. Was he
pretty
drunk?
bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. Let's hear him again. Let's hear the mellifluous tones of our great Colorado governor here.
Feliz Navidad.
Yeah.
Feliz Navidad.
Yeah.
Feliz Navidad. Prospero año y felicidad.
He's wearing the standard suit and tie. He's in front of the Colorado state flag and the U.S. flag, so it looks like this. It's an official message from the governor of Colorado, and it's been roundly ridiculed. But I think he's VP material.
What do you think is worse, the singing or the dancing, Larry?
I'm going with the dancing, actually.
I'm with
because
you.
I've heard worse singing.
Yeah, I've heard worse singing. At least he kind of hits the notes. Kind
So
of.
Julio Rosas sees this, and I did laugh out loud when I saw his response. He said, "This is how white people who say Latinx look like to Latinos." It's 100% correct.
Wow.
100%. So this is a great moment in political pandering history, and to emphasize the fact, I actually wanted to look up what was Spanish for pandering. The word is proxenetissimo. Proxenetissimo is pandering. But here's the best part. You can use this word in Spanish, and I just want to make sure, I'm sure I didn't get the pronunciation right.
Proxenetismo.
There. Proxenetismo. Thank you.
Interesting. Okay, sorry.
Well, that's Spanish for pandering, which this Democrat governor is doing. But you can also use that word for pimping.
Oh, well,
So
that works.
I
Yes.
think it's appropriate.
By the
Sometimes
way,
Spanish works better than English.
Did you look at Governor Jared Polis's Twitter account?
I did. I refused to
He
click
changed it to Gobernador.
further.
the
Gubernador.
Spanish
Oh,
for
well, listen.
governor.
I mean, Colorado is a border town. You got a huge Latino
No, but
population.
he's really into it.
Julio Rosas joins us about that, and also about the very real problems on our border that he's been covering like no one else. That's coming up at 8:35. In the meantime, Feliz Navidad, everybody. It's 7:54. Coming up in our 8 o'clock hour, we're going to start off with Sean Carney of 40 Days for Life. And then we'll speak with Julio Rosas about his favorite political Feliz Navidad serenade. That's all coming up. And, by the way, speaking of pandering in Spanish, Feliz cumpleaños to our friend Mercedes Schlapp. It's her birthday today.